The evening air outside was cool and fresh, and the sky had begun to turn a deep shade of blue. The small diner on the corner of Maple Street glowed warmly in the dim light, a beacon for late-night travelers, truck drivers, and locals who wanted a quick meal after work. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and grilled food filled the air, mixing with the gentle sound of a slow country song playing from the old jukebox in the corner. Maya Carter stood behind the counter, refilling the sugar, jars, and making sure every table had clean napkins. She had worked at the diner for almost 3 years and knew every corner of the place by heart. It was not a big or fancy restaurant, but it was honest work, and Maya took pride in doing her best. She liked talking to the regulars, listening to their small stories, and making them feel welcome. That night was calm. Only a few customers were scattered across the room. An elderly couple sat by the window sharing a slice of pie. A young man in a hoodie scrolled through his phone while sipping tea. A pair of truck drivers were finishing their burgers before heading back on the road. Everything felt peaceful. Maya glanced at the clock above the coffee machine. It was almost 8:30, and she was thinking about how quiet the shift had been when the sound of an engine outside broke the calm. A long, black limousine rolled to a stop right in front of the diner. It looked completely out of place on the small street, its polished surface reflecting the streetlights. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out first. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and a gold watch that caught the light as he moved. His shoes were so clean they looked like they had never touched the ground. He glanced around as if the street was beneath him, then adjusted his cufflinks before walking toward the door. Behind him came 3 other men and 2 women, all dressed in expensive clothes. They laughed among themselves as if they had just come from an important event. When they entered the diner, the warm chatter of the room faded slightly. It was not every day a group like this walked into a place where most customers wore work boots and jackets. Maya straightened her apron and approached them with her usual polite smile. "Good evening. Table for 6?" she asked warmly. The man in front, who seemed to be their leader, gave her a quick glance. "Yes, and make it somewhere private," he said, his tone confident but slightly dismissive. Maya led them to the largest booth in the back corner, away from the door and windows. She handed out menus and poured water into their glasses. The man in the suit, whose name she would soon learn was Gregory Vale, did not look at the menu right away. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, scanning the diner as if deciding whether he approved of it. "Not exactly the kind of place I'm used to," Gregory remarked, loud enough for a few nearby customers to hear. His friends chuckled lightly, though some looked a little unsure whether they should laugh. Maya ignored the comment, choosing to keep her tone pleasant. "We have some of the best pie in the city, and the coffee is always fresh. Can I start you off with drinks?" Gregory glanced at her name tag. "Maya, all right, Maya, surprise us. Just make sure it's not too cheap." He smiled at his own remark as if it were clever. Maya made a quick note on her pad and turned toward the counter to prepare their drinks. She could feel some eyes on her, but she kept her steps steady. She had dealt with all kinds of customers before, some kind, some impatient, some simply tired from long days, and she always believed the best response to rudeness was professionalism. Behind the counter, she poured their drinks while the other customers returned to their meals, though a few kept glancing at the back booth. Gregory's voice carried across the room whenever he spoke, smooth and confident, but also sharp enough to be noticed. When she returned to the table with a tray, Gregory moved his glass slightly so she could place it down. "So, Maya, tell me," he began, "is this your dream job?" There was a pause. One of his friends shifted uncomfortably in their seat. Maya set the rest of the drinks down before answering. "I'm happy to have honest work and good people around me," she said, simply. Gregory tilted his head as if he was studying her, then leaned closer to his friends. "I guess everyone's definition of success is different," he said with a smile, his voice carrying just enough for others to hear. Maya offered a polite nod and took their food orders without letting her expression change. She wrote every detail down carefully and thanked them before walking back toward the kitchen. Inside, she felt a small knot in her chest, but she refused to let it show. She had been raised to believe that respect was a choice you made, even when others did not give it in return. In the kitchen, she handed the order slip to the cook, a kind older man named Frank who had worked there for over 20 years. Frank raised an eyebrow and asked quietly, "New customers?" "Something like that," Maya replied, keeping her voice low. She did not want to make a scene or give them the satisfaction of knowing they had bothered her. As the food cooked, Maya returned to the other tables, refilling coffee cups and checking on the regulars. She made small jokes with the truck drivers and asked the elderly couple if they wanted another slice of pie. Bit by bit, the normal rhythm of the diner began to return, but in the back of her mind, she knew the night's calm was not going to last. From the corner booth, she could still hear Gregory's confident laugh and see the way he gestured as he spoke, dominating the conversation. Every now and then, she caught one of his friends glancing toward her with an expression that was somewhere between sympathy and nervousness. It was as if they sensed Gregory's words might soon cross a line. Maya took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Whatever came next, she would handle it the same way she always had, with grace, patience, and strength. She did not yet know that before the night was over, every person in that diner would remember her for more than just good service. The sound of plates clinking and the gentle hum of conversation filled the diner again, but there was still a faint edge in the air. Maya carried a tray loaded with steaming plates toward the corner booth where Gregory Vale and his group were, seated. The cook had taken special care to make the meals look perfect, with golden fries stacked neatly beside juicy burgers and salads dressed with care. As she approached the booth, Gregory was in the middle of telling a story. His hands moved in sharp, confident gestures, and his voice was steady, the tone of someone who was used to speaking and being listened to. His friends leaned in slightly, nodding along and laughing at the right moments. Maya reached the table and began setting down the plates, announcing each order with practiced ease. Cheeseburger with fries, grilled chicken salad, double bacon, burger, turkey club, and for you, the steak, medium rare. She placed each plate in front of the right person without hesitation. When she set Gregory's plate down, he gave her a quick glance and then smirked. "You're good at this, Maya. I can tell you've been doing it for, what, your whole life?" His tone was light, but there was a sharp edge to the words. Maya straightened and looked at him calmly. "I've been working here for a few years," she replied. "It's a good place to work." Gregory tapped his fork on the edge of the plate and gave a small chuckle. "A few years. Impressive dedication to pouring coffee and carrying plates." His friends laughed softly, though not all of them seemed comfortable doing so. One of the women at the table gave him a quick warning glance, but he ignored it. The laughter caught the attention of the young man in the hoodie sitting 2 tables away. He glanced over, then looked back at his tea, clearly unsure if he should get involved. The elderly couple by the window also turned their heads, their smiles fading a little. Maya kept her voice steady as she said, "It's honest work. That matters to me." Gregory leaned back in his seat, his arm draped over the booth. "Of course. But don't you want something bigger? Something more important? I mean, you could be doing something worth talking about. You could be making real money instead of counting tips." Maya didn't respond right away. She picked up the empty water glasses from the table and set them on her tray. "I'm happy where I am," she said simply, before turning toward the counter. As she walked away, Gregory's voice followed her, still loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Happiness is nice, but I'd rather have success. Then again, maybe some people just aim lower." The words hung in the air for a moment. One of the truck drivers stopped mid-bite and exchanged a glance with his friend. Even the cook, Frank, leaned out from the kitchen window with a frown. Maya placed the empty glasses on the counter and took a slow breath. She could feel her chest tighten, but she refused to let anger show on her face. She had dealt with rude customers before, but there was something about Gregory's tone that made the whole room pay attention. He wasn't just making a casual comment. He was performing for an audience. Back at the booth, Gregory's friends began eating, trying to steer the conversation away from his remarks. One of the women started talking about an upcoming charity event, but Gregory waved her off and returned to his earlier story about closing a major business deal. His voice carried again, and his words dripped with self-importance. Maya returned a few minutes later to refill their drinks. She moved carefully, making sure each glass was topped without spilling a drop. Gregory watched her closely, almost as if waiting for her to say something back. When she didn't, he spoke again. "You know, Maya, I started with nothing. I didn't waste my time in places like this. I worked my way up until I could afford a car like the one outside. That's the difference between people who succeed and people who stay where they are." The sentence was left hanging, but the meaning was clear. One of his friends shifted uncomfortably and muttered, "Greg," under his breath. Maya placed the last glass down and straightened. She looked at him calmly, her eyes steady. "It's good that you're proud of your success. I'm proud of my work, too." Gregory gave a short laugh and shook his head. "Pride is fine, but pride doesn't buy much." Before Maya could reply, a voice came from the corner. It was the truck driver with the gray beard. "Respect buys more than you think," he said, his tone calm but firm. The diner went still for a moment. Gregory's eyes flicked toward the man, then back to Maya. He gave a thin smile, clearly not used to being challenged. "Fair enough," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't mean it. Maya nodded politely and stepped away from the booth. She went to check on the other customers, but the mood of the diner had shifted. The quiet warmth from earlier was now mixed with a silent awareness of the tension in the back corner. Frank rang the bell from the kitchen, signaling that another order was ready. Maya delivered it quickly, but as she moved around the room, she could feel Gregory's eyes following her. It was as if he was looking for another chance to provoke her, to test how far he could push before she reacted. She decided she would not give him that satisfaction. For now, she would keep doing her job exactly as she always had, with a steady hand and a calm heart. But deep down, she knew the night was far from over. Gregory Vale was the kind of man who thrived on being the center of attention, and sooner or later, he would push his words past the point of polite conversation. When that happened, Maya would be ready. The hum of the diner's old ceiling fan filled the silence between conversations. Maya moved from table to table, checking coffee levels and clearing plates. She was aware of Gregory Vale's voice drifting across the room from the corner booth. It had the tone of someone who enjoyed hearing himself talk, each word chosen to draw attention. At first, his group had been focused on their food, but once the plates were half empty, Gregory seemed to grow restless. He began telling stories about his travels to expensive resorts and dinners at private clubs. His voice was loud enough that customers who had no interest in his stories could not help overhearing. Frank, the cook, peeked from the kitchen window, again. His brows were drawn together, and Maya could tell he was watching Gregory closely. A few regulars were also glancing toward the back booth every so often. Something about Gregory's energy seemed to pull at the room, and it was not in a good way. Maya took a tray of clean glasses to the counter and tried to focus on her work. She knew that some customers looked for a reaction when they made cutting remarks. The best response was usually calm silence. But she also knew there was a limit to how much one could ignore. As she placed the glasses on the shelf, Gregory's voice rose again. "You know what's wrong with this country?" he began, looking at his friends but pitching his voice to Carrie. "Too many people are satisfied with small lives. They get comfortable waiting tables or stocking shelves and they convince themselves it's enough. That's not ambition. That's fear. One of his friends shifted in his seat. Greg, maybe... Gregory waved him off and continued. If you're not moving up, you're just standing still. And standing still is the same as moving backward. The young man in the hoodie at the other table looked up from his phone, his eyes narrowing slightly. The elderly couple by the window paused in their quiet conversation. Even the two truck drivers, who had been halfway through a heated debate about road routes, turned their heads toward the booth. Maya walked to the table with the coffee pot in her hand. She stopped beside Gregory's booth and asked politely, "Would anyone like a refill?" Gregory looked up with a smirk. "Sure, top me off. You're good at that," he said, sliding his cup forward. Then, with a glance at his friends, he added, "You ever think about doing something more? I mean, waiting tables isn't exactly a long-term plan, is it?" Maya poured the coffee steadily, not spilling a drop. "This job helps me take care of my family," she said evenly. "That's important to me." Gregory laughed softly. "Family's important, sure, but money is what makes the world work. You can't help your family much if you're living off tips." One of the women at the table gave a small sigh. "Greg, stop," she said quietly, but he only shrugged. Maya placed the coffee pot back on the tray. She could feel the air in the room growing heavier, as if every ear was tuned to their conversation. She was about to turn away when Gregory leaned back and said, "Look, I'm just saying, some people are leaders, some are followers, and some are just servers." That word, the way he stretched it, made the truck driver in the corner set down his fork. His friend leaned back in his seat, eyes fixed on Gregory. The young man in the hoodie stopped pretending to scroll his phone and sat up straighter. The whole diner seemed to be holding its breath. Maya felt the knot in her chest tighten. She took a slow breath before speaking. "Serving others doesn't make someone less important," she said quietly, but firmly. Gregory raised an eyebrow as if amused by her courage. "Maybe not, but it doesn't make them important either." The words hung there, cold and heavy. One of his friends shifted again, clearly uncomfortable, but no one spoke. Maya turned and walked toward the counter. She needed a moment to decide how far she was willing to let this go. She was not angry in the way Gregory probably expected. Instead, she felt something steadier, the understanding that moments like this tested who you were. Behind her, Gregory chuckled and went back to his story about a business meeting in New York. The sound was smooth but hollow, as if he was speaking for effect rather than enjoyment. Frank caught Maya's eye from the kitchen window. "You okay?" he mouthed. Maya gave a small nod, though she knew things were reaching a point where she would have to respond. She turned her attention to wiping down the counter, letting her mind settle. From the back booth came another round of laughter. Gregory's voice cut through it. "See? This is what I mean. If you don't take control, you end up serving people who do. That's just the way life works." That sentence seemed to be the spark. The young man in the hoodie stood and walked to the counter to pay his bill early. As Maya handed him his change, he said quietly, "You don't have to take that from him." Maya gave him a faint smile. "I know." When the young man left, she turned back toward the booth. Gregory had just finished another story, and his friends were only half listening now. The tension in the room was clear. Even the soft music from the jukebox felt distant. Maya picked up the coffee pot again. This time she knew what she was going to say when she walked back to that table. The thought of it steadied her, like a deep breath before diving into water. The night was no longer about just delivering food and drinks. It was about dignity, hers, and the dignity of everyone who worked hard without demanding applause. Gregory Vale might not realize it yet, but the moment he was pushing toward was one he would not soon forget. Maya stood at the counter with the coffee pot in her hand, the warm glass pressing lightly against her palm. She could feel the quiet weight of the diner around her. Every movement, every sound seemed sharper now. The scrape of a fork against a plate, the low hum of the refrigerator in the corner, the distant rumble of a truck passing outside. Gregory Vale was still talking, his voice steady and full of self-assurance. His friends nodded politely, but there was less energy in their laughter now. They seemed aware that something in the air had changed. The other customers kept their heads turned just enough to see what might happen next. Maya walked toward the back booth, her steps even and unhurried. When she reached the table, she topped off each glass of water and refilled the coffee cups. Gregory leaned back with his arm across the booth, watching her with the faint smile of someone expecting another quiet answer. But this time, Maya did not turn away immediately. She set the coffee pot down on the edge of their table, placed both hands lightly on the tray she carried, and met Gregory's eyes. "Can I say something?" she asked, her voice calm but clear. Gregory's smile widened slightly. "Of course. I love hearing what people think." She nodded once. "You've been telling us about success, about how some people move up and some don't, about how money is the way to measure a life. I think I understand your point, but I want to tell you mine." The diner was silent now. Even the two truck drivers had put down their forks. The elderly couple near the window leaned in closer to hear. Maya's tone stayed steady, without a trace of anger. "I work here because I choose to. I've had other jobs, but this one lets me take care of my mother. She's been sick for a while. This schedule means I can be home when she needs me. It means I can pay for her medicine without leaving her alone at night. That matters more to me than the kind of car I drive or the suit I wear." Gregory shifted slightly, but she went on. "You say money is everything. I think respect is everything. Respect for people who work hard, whether they're running a company or pouring coffee. You say ambition is important. I agree. But ambition isn't only about climbing the tallest ladder. Sometimes it's about building something strong and steady for the people you care about." The silence in the diner deepened. Outside, a passing car's headlights swept briefly across the windows before fading into the night. Maya rested one hand on the edge of the table. "Every day, I serve people from all kinds of backgrounds. Some are wealthy, some are barely getting by. The thing I've learned is that worth doesn't come from a paycheck. It comes from how you treat others when no one is watching. And tonight, a lot of people are watching." Her words hung there, calm but heavy. She didn't raise her voice or rush. She just let the truth settle into the space between them. Gregory opened his mouth as if to reply, but nothing came out right away. His friends looked down at their plates or their hands. One of the women at the table gave Maya a small, almost grateful nod. From the corner, the gray-bearded truck driver spoke up. "She's right." His voice was low but firm, and his friend agreed with a short nod. Maya took the coffee pot again, but she didn't move just yet. "I'm not here to impress you," she said simply. "I'm here to do my job well, and I think I've done that tonight. But I also think it's important you understand that success doesn't give anyone the right to make others feel small. Not here, not anywhere." She stepped back from the table, lifting the pot onto her tray. "Enjoy the rest of your meal." As she turned toward the counter, the quiet broke. A soft, scattered applause began, first from the elderly couple, then from the young man in the hoodie, and then from others. It wasn't loud, but it was steady and warm. Maya didn't pause to take in the reaction. She walked back to the counter, placed the coffee pot down, and reached for a clean towel to wipe a table. She had said what she needed to say. Whether Gregory accepted it or not was his choice. At the booth, Gregory sat with his hands resting on the table. The smirk he had worn for most of the night was gone. He glanced at his friends, but none of them spoke. Finally, he picked up his fork and began to eat, though much more quietly than before. The rest of the diner began to return to its usual rhythm. Conversations picked up again, plates clinked, and the jukebox's soft music filled the space. But there was still a quiet awareness among the customers that they had just witnessed something worth remembering. Frank leaned out from the kitchen window and gave Maya a small smile. "Well handled," he said. She smiled back, though she didn't feel triumphant. What she felt was something steadier, a reminder that standing your ground didn't have to mean raising your voice. It could mean speaking the truth clearly and letting it settle where it needed to. In the corner booth, Gregory Vale glanced around the diner as if seeing it for the first time. The polished confidence in his expression was gone, replaced by a thoughtful stillness. He didn't speak much for the rest of the meal. When his group finally finished, Maya brought the check to the table. Gregory took it without looking up and reached for his wallet. As he placed the bill on the table, he hesitated for just a moment. Then he slid a business card beneath it. Maya didn't notice the card right away. She was busy clearing another table and refilling a customer's tea. But the woman from Gregory's group lingered at the door before leaving, giving Maya a small, almost knowing smile. The night shift was nearly over, but the feeling in the room stayed with her. She knew the moment would be remembered not because of raised voices or sharp insults, but because of a choice. The choice to speak with calm strength when it mattered most. For a long moment after Maya's words, the diner felt frozen. The soft hum of the ceiling fan continued overhead, the jukebox still played its slow tune, and the scent of fresh coffee hung in the air, yet nothing seemed to move. Every person in the room was still processing what they had just heard. Maya had walked away from Gregory's booth without raising her voice or showing anger. She had simply spoken the truth, steady and unshaken, and it had carried through the small space like a bell. The customers nearest to the back booth kept their heads turned, their eyes moving between Gregory and Maya. Gregory sat very still in his seat. He wasn't smiling anymore. His fingers traced the edge of his coffee cup in slow, almost distracted motions. His friends shifted in their seats, some looking down at their plates, others glancing toward Maya at the counter. The woman who had earlier tried to quiet him now seemed to be watching him carefully, as if waiting to see what he would do next. The first sound to break the stillness came from the elderly couple by the window. The man leaned back in his seat and gave a quiet nod, as though confirming something to himself. Then his wife, with a small but proud smile, began clapping. It was a slow, deliberate sound, not meant to draw attention to herself, but to acknowledge what had just happened. The young man in the hoodie joined in next, his hands coming together in a sharper rhythm. Then the two truck drivers put down their forks and added their applause, deep and steady. Within seconds, the sound had spread. Every customer in the diner was clapping, some softly, some louder, but all with the same expression, a mixture of respect and quiet satisfaction. Maya didn't turn around right away. She kept wiping the counter as if nothing unusual was happening, but her chest felt warm. She knew the applause wasn't for her as a person, not exactly. It was for the truth she had spoken, a truth that belonged to everyone in the room who had ever been made to feel small. Gregory glanced around the diner. The applause didn't seem to anger him, but it did take him by surprise. His confident posture had loosened. He leaned forward now, resting both elbows on the table, his eyes flicking from one table to another. When the clapping faded, the quiet that followed was different from the silence before. It wasn't tense anymore. It felt lighter, like a room that had just been aired out after being closed too long. Conversations began to start again, but they were softer, as if people didn't want to break the calm completely. Frank stepped out from behind the counter and carried a tray of fresh coffee cups to a table near the front. As he passed Maya, he murmured just loud enough for her to hear, "You've got the whole place on your side now." Maya gave a small smile and continued working. She didn't want to make the moment about winning or losing. She simply wanted the rest of the night to pass in peace. Gregory's group finished their meals quietly. A few times, Gregory seemed about to speak, but then he stopped himself. Instead, he listened while his friends talked about other topics, business plans, upcoming travel, and light jokes that didn't carry the same sharpness as before. Across the room, the truck drivers resumed their conversation, though now it was sprinkled with glances toward Maya and approving nods. The young man in the hoodie, who had stayed longer than necessary after paying his bill, finally stood and headed for the door. As he passed Maya, he gave her a short, respectful nod. "Take care," he said, before stepping outside into the night. The elderly couple lingered over their pie for a while, clearly in no rush to leave. They spoke in low tones, occasionally glancing toward Maya with warm smiles. As time passed, the diner's usual rhythm returned, the sound of forks against plates, the soft clink of coffee cups, and the faint hum of conversation filled the space again. Yet the memory of what had happened still sat quietly in the background, unspoken but shared by everyone. When Gregory's table was finally ready to leave, the group slid out of the booth one by one. The women walked ahead, exchanging polite goodbyes with Maya as they passed. One of them gave her a small, almost knowing smile, as though she wanted to say more but chose not to. Gregory was the last to stand. He adjusted his jacket, reached for the bill, and pulled out his wallet. He placed enough cash on the table to cover the meal and added a folded business card on top. He hesitated for a moment, his gaze fixed on the card as if weighing whether to leave it. Then he turned and walked toward the door without looking back. The door's bell jingled softly as they stepped out into the night. The limousine's headlights came on, casting bright beams across the diner's windows before the car slowly rolled away. Maya approached the booth to clear the table. She stacked the plates carefully, gathering the used cutlery and napkins. When she lifted the bill, she noticed the folded card beneath it. She paused, glancing at the door, though Gregory was long gone. Sliding the card into her apron pocket, she carried the dishes to the counter. She decided not to look at it yet. The night wasn't over, and there were still customers to serve. As the last few tables finished their meals, the diner's warmth returned in full. People spoke more easily now, smiling as they talked. A few exchanged quiet words with Maya when she came by, thanking her not just for the food, but for the way she had handled herself earlier. By the time closing hours approached, the air outside had turned colder, and the street outside the diner was empty except for the occasional passing car. Maya stood at the counter counting the register while Frank wiped down the last of the tables. "You know," Frank said, "people will be talking about tonight for a while." Maya shook her head lightly. "It was just another night. I just did my job." Frank gave a small laugh. "No, you reminded people what respect looks like. That's not something they see every day." Maya didn't argue. She simply smiled, finished the count, and turned off the coffee machine. But deep down, she knew Frank was right. What had happened tonight wasn't ordinary, and the quiet that had fallen after her words wasn't ordinary either. It was the kind of silence that comes when people are listening, really listening, and letting a truth sink in. For a moment after Maya's words, the air in the diner seemed heavier. It was not the heaviness of sadness, but the weight of realization that had settled in on everyone present. Gregory Vale, the man who had been so loud and confident just moments before, now sat quietly. His hand rested on the coffee cup in front of him, but he did not take a sip. He stared into the dark surface of the drink as if looking for something hidden there. The people around him did not speak either. His associates, who had been laughing along earlier, now looked uneasy. One man shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. Another stared down at his plate, avoiding eye contact with anyone. They had come expecting an evening of jokes, food, and conversation, but they had not expected to be confronted with truth in such a public way. At Another table, a young couple exchanged a glance. They had watched the entire exchange, feeling a mix of discomfort and admiration. The woman leaned toward her partner and whispered something too softly for anyone else to hear. Her eyes never left Maya, who was now calmly moving on to another table to refill drinks as if nothing unusual had happened. The truck driver in the corner was the first to break the silence. He nodded slowly, a small smile forming on his face. He had seen a lot of things in his years on the road. He had met people from every kind of background, but he always respected those who worked hard and stood their ground. To him, Maya's words had been more than just a reply. They had been a lesson, one that some people clearly needed to hear. Gregory shifted in his seat. His usual confident posture was gone. He looked at Maya briefly as she passed by, then quickly looked away. Something in her calm presence made it difficult for him to continue the role he had been playing all evening. It was strange for him. He was used to controlling the room with his voice, with his presence, with his wealth. Now none of those things seemed to matter. The cook in the kitchen had heard everything. From his small service window, he leaned forward, arms resting on the counter, and watched the scene. He had known Maya for years, ever since she started working at the diner. He was proud of her, though he did not say it aloud. He had seen customers be rude before, but he had also seen how Maya never lost her composure. Tonight, however, was different. Tonight, her words had not just defended her dignity, they had changed the entire mood of the place. A few soft claps began at the far end of the room. At first, they were hesitant, almost uncertain. Then others joined in. The sound of applause filled the diner, echoing against the walls. It was not loud or wild, but steady and sincere. Maya looked up from pouring coffee for an elderly man at the counter. She seemed a little surprised by the sound, but she smiled politely and nodded. She did not bask in the attention. She simply continued working. Gregory's face was unreadable. He watched the scene unfold but said nothing. Perhaps he was thinking about his own life. Perhaps he was considering the people he had dismissed or belittled without a second thought. Or perhaps he was wondering why the words of a waitress in a small diner had managed to cut through all the layers of confidence and pride he wore so easily. One of his associates cleared his throat, clearly wanting to leave. But Gregory did not move. He stayed seated, hands folded on the table now, eyes on his untouched meal. For the first time that night, he seemed smaller, not in size, but in presence. Maya returned to their table eventually, setting down the check with her usual calm tone. "Whenever you're ready," she said. There was no sarcasm, no smugness, only professionalism and courtesy, the same way she treated every customer. That, perhaps, was the most striking part. She had stood her ground without anger, without insults, and without raising her voice. The businessman sitting next to Gregory shifted uncomfortably. "We should get going," he said quietly. Gregory nodded but still did not stand. His eyes followed Maya as she walked away again. The room slowly began to return to normal. Conversations restarted, though they were quieter now. People were speaking in lower tones as if they were still processing what had happened. The cook went back to flipping burgers, the truck driver returned to his sandwich, and the couple resumed their quiet meal. But the air still carried the echo of Maya's words. Gregory finally reached for his wallet. He placed several bills on the table, far more than the total on the check. He hesitated for a moment before pulling a small business card from his jacket pocket. He looked at it, then flipped it over. On the blank side, he took a pen from his coat and began to write something. His handwriting was neat but slow, as if he was choosing each word carefully. His associates stood, ready to leave. Gregory stayed, a moment longer, looking down at what he had written. He placed the card on top of the bills, then stood and adjusted his jacket. Without another word, he walked toward the door. Several people watched him go, curious about what he might be thinking. But Gregory gave no sign. He stepped outside into the cool night air, the sound of the diner's bell fading behind him. Inside, Maya noticed the card but did not pick it up right away. She continued clearing the table, placing the dishes on her tray. When she finally lifted the card, she read the short note written on the back. There was no apology, no long explanation, just a simple sentence that made her pause. She slid the card into her apron pocket without showing anyone. The moment passed, but the feeling it left behind stayed. The diner's regular rhythm had returned, but there was something different now, a quiet respect in the way people looked at Maya as she moved from table to table. Gregory Vale's voice no longer filled the room, but his silence had said more than his words ever could. Maya kept working as the night went on. For her, it was another shift, another evening of serving coffee and meals to strangers. But for the people who had witnessed what happened, it was a story they would remember. It was proof that sometimes the simplest truths, spoken with calm strength, could change the way people saw the world. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over Maple Street, casting warm light through the windows of the small diner. Inside, the familiar sounds of coffee brewing, pans clattering, and friendly greetings filled the air. Maya arrived early, ready. To begin her shift, her steps calm and confident as always. She noticed the diner felt lighter somehow, as if the events of the previous night had left a mark not only on the customers but also on the place itself. A few regulars were already seated, sipping coffee and exchanging quiet smiles. The air was filled with an unspoken respect and kindness that had been missing before. Maya greeted each customer with a warm smile and a kind word. She noticed the young man from the night before sitting at the counter, nodding in greeting. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," Maya replied, pouring a fresh cup of coffee for him. "How's your day starting?" "Better," he said, smiling faintly. "Thanks for last night." Maya simply nodded, not wanting to make too much of it. To her, it had been just doing what was right. As the morning went on, a small group of people gathered near the door. Among them was a well-dressed woman who had been part of Gregory Vale's group the night before. She approached the counter with a friendly smile. "Hi, Maya," the woman said gently. "I wanted to thank you for your words last night. You spoke with such calm and strength. It reminded me of something important." Maya blinked in surprise but smiled politely. "Thank you. I'm glad to hear that." The woman nodded. Sometimes, people forget that kindness and respect are the real measures of success. I wanted to invite you to a community event we're organizing next week. It's about supporting local workers and celebrating stories like yours. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. Invitations like this were not common in her life, but she accepted it gratefully. "I would love to come. Thank you." Later, that morning, Maya found a moment to look at the business card Gregory Vale had left behind. It was simple, just his name, company, and contact information. On the back, the note he had written was short but thoughtful. "Respect where it is earned." She folded the card carefully and placed it in her apron pocket. It wasn't an apology, but it was a sign that something had shifted. The days that followed brought more visitors to the diner. Some came out of curiosity, having heard about the evening when Maya had spoken her truth. Others were drawn by word of mouth, wanting to meet the woman who had quietly changed the mood of a room with her calm courage. Maya continued to work with her usual grace. She welcomed new customers and cared for the regulars, always offering a listening ear and a kind word. The diner became a place where stories were shared, and respect was felt by everyone who walked through the door. One afternoon, as Maya was clearing a table, a young boy approached her shyly. "Are you the lady who talked to that rich man last week?" he asked, his eyes wide with admiration. Maya smiled gently. Yes, that was me. Why do you ask? The boy grinned. My mom told me about it. She said you were very brave. I want to be brave like you when I grow up. Maya knelt down to his level and nodded. You already are brave. Standing up for what you believe is the greatest courage of all. As the sun set and the diner closed for the day, Maya stood by the window looking out at the quiet street. The city lights flickered on and the world outside felt full of possibility. She thought about the night when a billionaire had mocked her and how her simple words had changed everything. It was not about winning or losing, she realized. It was about dignity, respect, and the power of speaking truth with kindness. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She glanced at it and saw a message from an unknown number. It was Gregory Vale. Thank you for last night. I'm learning what true success means. Maya smiled softly. She typed a quick reply. Thank you for listening. That's the first step. As she put her phone away, she felt a quiet hope. Maybe this was just the beginning of something new, not just for her, but for everyone who believed in respect and kindness. And in that moment, Maya knew that no matter what came next, she would face it with the same calm strength that had carried her through the night before.